When you look outside, what do you see? Trees, grass, birds, maybe a squirrel or two, and a building. The building could be a residence, a shed, office, or even some commercial building. Regardless, it is architecture. Architecture has been with us since the beginning of time, providing us with warmth from cold and shelter from the rain. The job of an architect has always been revered in high accountability, and it comes with the job. The first recorded architect in history was Imhotep, and he designed the Djoser funerary complex or tomb in Egypt. It's of a ziggurat fashion that is almost stepped, so it's kind of triangle shaped and it goes like that. The career in itself is just about as revered as being a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. When it comes to all being an architect, the school is also very important. Architecture school is one of the most important things one must do in order to become an architect. Architecture school typically lasts from 4 to 5 years for a bachelor's degree, and it differentiates for a BFA into an MFA, where a BFA will become sometimes 2 to 3 years, maybe even 4, depending on the college. Like as here, I've listed some of the top 10 undergrad schools. So some of the top 10 are Cornell University, Syracuse, Cornell, Virginia Polytech, and one of the schools I got accepted into was University of Texas. My school it was in Kaplan's top 25 schools, cutting edge schools for design, architecture, and engineering. And when it comes to Master's of Architecture schools, the top are typically of Ivy League stature, where it comes to Harvard, Stanford, Princeton. All those schools are really good. And Rice, I think, was number 8 when it came to top 10 master's program. After completing architecture school, interning, apprenticeship will also be necessary before testing to get your licensing to become an architect. As the book, 101 Things I Learned in Architecture School states, most architects don't truly become professional until their 50s. This means that architecture is continual and it's progression. Such architects as Daniel Libeskind, Frank Gehry, and Zaha Hadid are all within their late 40s to early 50s and are at the heights of their careers. Here I have Daniel Libeskind. He's one of my favorite architects. He is a deconstructivist, meaning that something has to be constructed first before you deconstruct it. It's all based on fragmenting a line. So you see right here, this is the Royal Ontario Museum. It's all based on a crystalline structure. So there's crystals within that area, and what happened is, because they also have crystal showcase in there, Daniel Libeskind decided, okay, we're going to build off of the 19th century structure, which had the classical columns and such, and construct a crystallized shell within that. So there's voids within the structure where there's just nothing, and there's lines cutting through. It's an amazing structure. And right here we also have the Berlin Jewish Museum. As you see, you can see where there's lines cutting in, where sunlight is coming through. A lot of deconstructivist architecture is very psychological in the fact that there's more that goes into the way that it's produced. So this is the Berlin Museum right here. Well, not the Berlin, this one right here. The way this one was constructed was of prime people that had been killed from the Holocaust. Those were all pinpointed on the map, and lines were drawn. And that's the way how the windows and such were formed right here, and also the voids that were also constructed in that architecture. Frank Gehry is another deconstructivist. Frank Gehry, probably all seen from The Simpsons. He was on there. He's a really strange architect because the way that his process is, he uses a clear jar, and in that clear jar, he'll crumble a piece of paper in there and put it in there and see how that looks. And that's how this museum, well, the Disney Concert Hall, this is how that came to be, just by sticking paper in. Bilbao Museum in Spain. This one is also another special one because this also uses special software that they use for aerospace engineering. It was the first of its kind. This was designed around the late 80s, early 90s. And last, another architect, my favorite, is another deconstructivist, Zaha Hadid. This one, the Manchester Art Gallery, is really special because it just uses a lot of flowing and curvy lines. And she's one of the most renowned female architects too, which was also another big factor. And this one, the Zaragoza Bridge Pavilion, another psychological space, how it just goes up and just engulfs the person that's walking through it. It's really special. Right? And also, to become an architect, it's not just completing school, it's also about having your own style, being able to appeal to the style into your structures. Drawing is a must. Model making is another critical skill, since it's in order to convey one's point of a structure, it should be in 3D. And these are some of my own models that I've made myself. Right here, these two, this was the beginning of just showing how the curvature and the backbone of my structure was. I'm a deconstructivist by style. I don't know how it came to be, but it just happened over a period of years being in school. And you can see from just one model, because you just have to build study models just to see how it looks, and study models also to show how sunlight affects the structures. I also made the actual full model, where you can see the way how light casts shadows, and shadows is another important thing with architecture. Same thing is when it comes to residential buildings and the way that it's positioned in the sun. Down south, buildings are better off horizontal, because then when high noon comes out, you're not being blinded by the sun. Your house is not being heated, rather than the sun is just reflected off the roof. Whereas here, it's a little bit different because we're mid-Atlantic state. It's just strange. So I'm not getting into that. And then here is another one. This was actually a residence that I designed for myself. This was my own residence, all based off of music. And this bottom picture shows the interior where the master bedroom was.
Is that first picture leaning left?
This one?
Yeah, is that leaning to the left?
It's supposed to be like that.
Okay.
Hey,
Go ahead on.
That's good.
Right. And once one has received the degree, the intern hours and working for the firm, it takes about 10 years or so to become, an actual architect. It's just about like becoming a doctor. You have to take baby steps. You may have the degree in hand, you may be able to do everything, and you may have already taken that test, but it's always a progression. You can never be completely saying, hey, I'm the architect, I am the echelon of architecture. It's never going to happen. The first year of work, though, you can expect an income, according to Indeed.com salary generator, at the lowest, $55,000 a year. It can continue to grow as high as a star architect like Zaha Hadid or Daniel Libeskind earning upwards of $100,000, if not millions, according to projects. Architects, on average, compared to the engineers, architects pull in about 6% of the total cost of a whole project. Whereas if you have like a structural engineer or just any other engineer, they only take in 3%. So though people always think, hey, I'm going to school for engineering, I'm going to get paid. If you're working on a residential project, you're probably not going to get paid as much. But if you're a contractor, that's when you pull in more money anyway. So you're making about 8, 9, or 10%. So you'll always be better than the architect. But nobody ever really goes to school to become a contractor. It's just kind of a learned process. All right. Architecture, though very rewarding and highly revered, is more than a tough skill, but an even harder lifestyle. It's more than just long nights in the studio and a tough clientele. It's a responsibility for having a design that lasts for years for people to interact with through the means of physical, emotional, and a spiritual sense. So it's basically from the house to the office to even the church. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Very good.